On the Senate floor Thursday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called out Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. The moment came as Schumer was voicing his support for the DISCLOSE Act, an election contribution transparency bill. Schumer said that McConnell, quote, has claimed that the DISCLOSE Act is equivalent to threatening the privacy of individuals who want to make political contributions. Schumer then posed this question. I would ask the Republican leader, what about the privacy of tens of millions of women across the country? Those rights are now gone because radical justices were put on the court because of dark money in the first place.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
When 5 conservative justices handed down their opinion in Citizens United 12 years ago, the dissenters warned, quote, the court's ruling threatens to undermine the integrity of elected institutions across the nation. Sadly, they turned out to be right. By giving massive corporations the same rights as individual citizens, multi-billionaires being able to have their voice shouted out, drowning out the views of citizens, and by casting aside decades of campaign finance law, and by paving the way for powerful elites to anonymously pump endless cash into elections, Citizens United has disfigured our democracy almost beyond recognition. Today, the Senate will vote to begin curing our nation of this cancer when we take the first procedural vote on the DISCLOSE Act. Democrats are ready to move forward. Republicans today must face the music. Either vote to bring transparency and fairness back to our elections, as the vast majority of Americans want, or block this measure and cast their lot with the forces of dark money. So today's a very important day, and it would not be possible without the work of my friend and colleague, the Senator from Rhode Island, Senator Whitehouse. More than anyone in this chamber, Senator Whitehouse has labored relentlessly to shine a light on the link between dark money and so many of the ills that plague our politics, from the radicalization of our courts to the rise of climate deniers and more. I thank him for his work. Our entire caucus does. We stand with him strongly, fervently, in supporting this bill. The need for the DISCLOSE Act is great. The past decade has been the most expensive in the history of American elections. Billions have been raised and spent in super PAC and dark money. Because of Citizens United, a person's ability to affect the democratic process has largely become a function of their net worth, in gross violation of what the framers intended when they believed in one person, one vote. The DISCLOSE Act will remedy these ills with the very simple notion that sunlight is the greatest of disinfectants. It would require super PACs and other dark money groups to report anyone contributing $10,000 or more during an election cycle. The same goes for any group spending money in support or in opposition to judicial nominees. In other words, it would apply familiar forms of transparency that traditional campaigns and candidates already face when accepting political contributions. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. All of us should vote yes. Every single one of us should vote yes, because so many of the ills in our democracy are rooted in the primacy of dark money. We must rid ourselves of this foulness before it's too late, and our democracy could well become beyond saving. Over the past few days, the Republican leader has come to the floor and repeated the same time-worn, misleading arguments he's used for years when trying to discredit campaign finance reform. I mean, part of his arguments just get to the point of absurdity. Without a shred of irony, the Republican leader, for instance, has claimed that the DISCLOSE Act is equivalent to threatening the privacy of individuals who want to make political contributions. I would, as the Republican leader, I would ask the Republican leader, what about the privacy of tens of millions of women across the country? Those rights are now gone because radical justices were put on the court because of dark money in the first place. Does the Republican leader really think the supposed privacy of the billionaire donor class trumps the rights of women who have suffered the consequences of dark money spending? He would also have us think that transparency requirements would add a burden to average Americans who want nothing more than simply exercise their political opinions. That's bunkum. Those with the power to cut $10,000 or $1 million checks can tilt the tide of an entire election with a single donation. These are individuals with outsized influence that average Americans simply don't have. And when the Supreme Court extended the First Amendment to absurd lengths in Citizens United, they went way beyond what the Founding Fathers would have intended and what most Americans, the vast overwhelming majority of Americans, believe. At a bare minimum, the public has a right to know, simply to know, who is behind these massive donations, because at the end of the day, it is their rights that are on the line. And all of these arguments are really just done to obscure the issue. I mean, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that people will be multi-billionaires will be intimidated if they have to disclose their attempts to influence elections. It's just incredible that someone could argue that. But all these arguments are made for one purpose by the Republican leader and others, in my judgment, and that is to obscure what's really at issue. The Republican Party, for years, has been built on a foundation of dark money. It is how they have hijacked our courts. It is how they have promoted groups that push for voter suppression. It is how they have killed climate policy for years before Democrats finally pushed through our climate investments earlier this year. In a healthy democracy, American voters alone should have the power to determine the nation's leaders, without fear that their voices will be drowned out by powerful elites or special interests. Whether you're rich or poor, young or old, well-connected or otherwise, shouldn't matter. We should all be equal in our exercise of the franchise. That doesn't happen now. We all know that. The American people know it. Over 80% despise dark money. The DISCLOSE Act will help us restore that norm back into our politics by instilling transparency that we desperately need. Americans are tired of the corrosive power of dark money in our politics. They know something has been deeply amiss for a long time and that we need reforms to bring democracy back into balance. So I urge my colleagues to support this measure. I urge my Republican colleagues to work with us to break the stranglehold that dark money has in our elections. This bill would be a very important and much-needed start. Democracy can't prosper without transparency. I strongly support passing this legislation so we can safeguard our electoral process and keep the dream of our founders alive in this century. Now on another issue. Tomorrow, a cohort of House Republicans will travel to Western Pennsylvania to roll out what they claim is their GOP agenda. I want to skip right to the punchline. The GOP has made its agenda perfectly clear for months. A nationwide ban on abortion, Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block, raising taxes on working families. While Democrats continue to fight to defend a woman's right to choose, a central feature of the Republican agenda is eliminating abortions once and for all. Many of them will deny it, but not 2 weeks ago, the senator from South Carolina introduced a nationwide abortion ban here in the Senate. And the American people should not forget that nearly every Senate Republican is on record sponsoring and voting for nationwide abortion bans. So if Americans want to know what the GOP agenda is, look no further. Also, while Democrats pass legislation to lower prescription drug costs and extend affordable health care, every single Republican voted against legislation that would lower insulin costs for seniors on Medicare and have openly called for putting Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block. They seem to think tax cuts for the rich is good policy, but argue that Medicare and Social Security should no longer be guaranteed. And let's not forget, when they had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, their major accomplishment was cutting taxes on the rich. Cutting taxes on the rich. Is that what the American people want? Well, if you do, elect these Republicans. Finally, while Democrats want to keep taxes down for the middle class and working families, we want to help Americans save on their electric bills and health care. The senator from Florida, who chairs the Republican Senate campaign arm, has already released a GOP agenda that calls for raising taxes on working people. It's amazing that the election is around the corner and Republicans are still struggling to show a united front that appeals to the American people. Their fundamental problem is that the GOP is now the party of MAGA extremism, and there aren't enough press conferences in the world to change that fact. Finally, on Kigali. Yesterday was truly a high point for the U.S. Senate. After years of bipartisan work, the chamber ratified one of the most significant pro-climate, pro-job measures that has ever come to the floor, the Kigali Amendment. I thank the senators from Delaware and New Jersey, the senators from so many other states who worked so hard to make this happen. Ratifying the Kigali Amendment, along with passing the Inflation Reduction Act, is the strongest one-two punch against climate change any Congress has ever taken. Thanks to our commitment to phase out HFCs, we'll put ourselves in a position to lower global temperatures by 0.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the decade. So many people have overlooked this, but it's truly a significant milestone. 0.5 degree will have an enormous impact on the global scale. And the Kigali Amendment will also help American businesses secure an edge against China in the emerging industry of next-generation refrigerants. This market will see most of its growth outside the U.S., and Kigali will make sure that U.S. businesses will be able to take advantage of the new opportunities that will yield billions in new investments. And best of all, will create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs along the way. So once again, ratifying Kigali is a win-win-win. A win for U.S. jobs, a win for U.S. investment, and a win for U.S. leadership to protect the planet. I thank my colleagues for their excellent work in pushing Kigali finally over the finish line. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.